I'd like to say good evening, shalom, all praise to the Most High. Definitely on my spirit today after doing some reading, reviewing a few posts here and there, a few videos on social media. Kind of disappointed in what I'm seeing from folks who call themselves in the truth, call themselves teachers, mores, prophets, bishops, elders, apostles, people who have given themselves titles, or folks who have been attached titles by men. I'm definitely not a fan of hate and or racism. And since a child, I've had an absolute hatred for lies, especially being taught versus the truth. Don't like manipulating and people that subvert the truth to fit their own personal or prideful agendas. That being said, I'm really going to speak on the ignorance that is going on in our worldwide community, in what is taking place in religion and or indoctrination. That being said, I'm just going to speak a little bit about genealogy and lineage. If you follow the Bible, you learn that man here on earth was started through Adam and Eve. Along the way, seed was corrupted, both with fallen angel seed and or interference from Satan or Lucifer himself, appealing to the flesh of man, speaking into their ear, telling them what's right, what's wrong, versus what they were learned or told from their forefathers or by the Most High. That being said, we know that Noah was cast with the great uptaking in not only building an ark and keeping animals, whether clean or unclean, repopulating the earth with his children and their wives. He also preached, he evangelized for well over 100 years while getting ready for the flood that was to come. From his sons, the earth was repopulated. You had Japheth, you had Ham, and you had Shem. Understanding that most of the world at that time, most of the people on this earth were of a darker hue. There was some change in the mixings of genealogy and or tribes through the women and through the men. When you take time to read in Genesis, and if you look into the book of Enoch, you see that the fallen angels came down and they themselves mingled with the women of men. And because of that, you have fallen angel seed, which we know was throughout the kingdoms, but did mainly dwell in Mount Seir, with the Horites. We learn in reading, both in the Bible and in Jasher and in Enoch, that the fallen angels, in their mixing, Esau was one to eventually mix with them. I guess there would be what you consider people with modern day Neanderthal blood or traits. These are things you can find out in blood tests. But to try to stay definitely on track with this, I need folks to understand that when you read in the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, you read who were Japheth, who comes from the line of Japheth, basically meaning a lot of the Europeans. A lot of the hue and or color skin changes came from climate and not just beyond what was considered breeding out. So upon moving into the different climates, both being the cold, both being an area where it was both hot and cold, which was Shem's, and where it was really warm and really hot, which was Ham's. When Noah came off that ark, he gave his 3 sons rulership over areas. He divided the land. And when he divided the land, different people were supposed to go in different places. Canaan and his seed didn't always stay where they were supposed to be. And a lot of times they went into the lands of Shem. You will definitely see at some point, if you will look at the older maps and or the teachings under Pangea, which was basically saying one world, everything was connected at one point in time before the days of Peleg, Shem's land winds up being partly in America and the islands of the sea, and also in Africa. Again, this is something that I would beg you to do your own research on, and just not go off of what you're being told by men. Actually go and do the research. You have to study for yourself to find yourself approved, period. Again, with that being said, again, in Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, you find out that Japheth is more the progenitor of the European races, including Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi, people that call themselves Jews but really aren't Jews, because Jews actually come from the term Judean, which at the time of Christ's birth, there were 2 or 2.5 tribes that were actually still in Jerusalem. 10 tribes had already been taken into captivity by the Assyrians 600 years before Christ. So the only people that were actually there were Judah, or Yahudah, as the head tribe, Benjamin, which is the youngest son of Jacob, and the Levites. Some of the Levites were there. Again, with that being said, he said at that point in time, once his resurrection came through, I have sheep I must go to who are not of this fold, or sheep who are not of this fold I must go to also. So at that point, you can understand that not all 12 tribes were there upon the time when Christ and the apostles were all going around and doing their evangelizing. That's something that's not really talked about in most churches, Christian, Catholic, whatever. It's definitely not talked about. Again, during those time frames, you hear a lot about what will be considered a Jew, Gentile, and or heathen. And I think we need to get to the context of that. Heathen is someone that, I guess, does not carry the Spirit, does not care, or does not believe in any God other than themselves. Gentile can be someone who actually carries the blood, or could actually be an actual Jew that just does not choose to believe in the Messiah, nor follow any of his ways, and or follow pagan gods, whether it's Egyptian, Roman, Greek, what have you. What we have to understand is today we have people of all colors and all creeds and all tribes that are now going after pagan gods, period. You have people who are still going after Greek gods, which you would consider those who carry the title of Boule, or Black Greeks. You have people who are in Freemasonry and or Kemetic, who are going after Egyptian gods. And then unfortunately you have people who are so-called Israelites, whether they're in the religion of Christianity or what they believe they come out into the truth, who are still practicing those things, even such as divination and reading people's palms and giving them spiritual guidance based on necromancy. That we know as an abomination. Staying on track with what I was saying about bloodlines is Ham, and Canaan was his son. Ham is the progenitor of all the dark races except the Negro. The Negro is Shemitic, meaning they come from the line of Shem. Now, what we have to see and understand as a people, and when I say as a people, I mean everybody here in this world. I don't care what you think your line is based upon what you look like. Just to give you a for instance, any person could have had a European father or patriarch, and that father or patriarch could wind up having a son. That son could then mix with a woman who is of Hamite or Shemitic lineage, meaning darker at that point, and at that point have sons from her. If those sons all at that point started mating with darker women, whether it was Hamitic or Shemitic, then you would not know. You would not know by looking at them who the patriarch of their line is. Same thing goes for people who could have had we say during slavery times, go back 300, 400, 500 years. People say during slavery times, which we know that's relative throughout the ages. You go back through slavery times, and you could have some woman who was of European descent that got with a Hamitic or Shemitic man and had a son. That son could then choose to stick with European women. For every male child that comes out of that lineage, if they keep having men or sons who then begat more sons, guess what? They have a Hamitic patriarch or a Shemitic patriarch, but their color changed. Why am I saying this? Get to the point that we have to get out of looking at people and using biblical terms to try to alienate and divide who we are as a people and who can be saved. You can't just look at somebody and say, oh, because you're white, you're an Edomite, you're not saved. You can't be saved. You're going to be a slave, or you're going to die in hell for what you did to my ancestors. When you look and pay attention in the Bible in different places, you'll see that the tribe of Dan, which was, of course, Negro or Shemitic, they worked with Tubal, Tyre, basically descendants of Japheth, in slavery, and putting other tribes from the 12 tribes of Israel or Jacob, from putting those other tribes into slavery. Yeah. This happened for some time. So it didn't just start with what we think was the transatlantic slave trade. This started quite a long time ago. So there were people all over this earth who are descendants of the 12 tribes who intermix and intermingled, whether it was through marriage and branching in, or in some cases, some people, women of all colors, were raped. We also know that even on those so-called slave ships that people moved around on, they carried prostitutes of European descent, or Japhetic descent, Hamitic, and Shemitic, what some people call African, and then what some people call Negro here in the Americas. We also know that everybody traveled from all different areas, both from Africa, North Africa and Europe, and from America. And they didn't all just travel when Columbus showed up. We've had ships since the time of Solomon, Paul, and other patriarchs back in biblical times. So to think that ships were only used by people of one descent at one point in time is absolutely ludicrous. And I think it's time for people to really pay attention and look further in history for themselves and stop just listening to people who are telling you stories based upon their philosophy and interpretation. Like, you literally have to read and study to show your own self-approved. Basically what I'm getting at is, I would really, really hate to see my friends, my families, associates, people in general, whether I know you or not, look down upon someone based upon a caste system that was set up in society a long time ago just to divide the people. Was there a caste system in place at the time with the Israelites over anyone who was Hamitic or Japhetic? Yes, there was. And the reason why the Israelites, who we know to be of Negro descent, got into the place where they were was because they got prideful and haughty, believed they knew everything, believed that they were the gods at that point, and didn't follow after the law, statutes, commandments, and feast days of the Most High. They broke covenant. So to be idiotic, prideful, and hating towards someone who may be of European descent, but you don't really know just based upon the color of their skin, is stupid as hell. Considering that, what do we know about Jamestown? There were two types of slaves at that point in time. They were Negro Indian, and you also had Irish, both indentured servants, and or if you want to call it slaves. Something that's not talked about in history a lot is they both worked together and revolted, killed the slave masters, and burnt that town to the ground. So there are times when just because we all come from tribes, just because we all came from different tribes didn't mean we didn't work together. You cannot build empires throughout the world at any time just based on hatred and fear. You have to be based on love, charity, and working together. Loving your neighbor as yourself, brotherly love, loving our neighbor as your brother. It's harsh because I'm looking at people. You got folks with all types of YouTube channels that are going with, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 people viewing them. And these people are teaching hatred, absolute hatred, based upon what your eyes can see and not based upon spiritual discernment. The Father picks and chooses who he wants. He calls many, Few are chosen, and he chooses who he wants based upon their spiritual fruits, not what they do by their hands, not by the color of their skin, not who they think they are, or how long they've gone to school. You know how many people go to seminary school, divinity school, and don't know nothing based upon the outlines that they're given, the books that they're told to read and what not to read by man? Quite a few. Quite a few. And quite a few of those folks know more than what they're telling. But by the way of not only the 501c3s, but by the way of the people who are lining their pockets, they do not tell you more. They do not go into history. I went through this myself, coming from a kid growing up in Baltimore. I was one of those kids that always had questions. Yes, I had my ways. I wasn't a perfect kid. I thought because I read more than most, I knew it all. I had to find out, definitely in middle school, I didn't. And it took time talking to certain teachers to say, hey, they're saying, we can only teach you but so much because we have an outline that we have to go by. And it's approved, and that's what we can teach you. Yes, there's more in the books that we can't talk about or we'd like to talk about, and there's more books that you don't even have access to. I had one teacher who told me this guy happened to be a self-proclaimed Moor, and he was also a Freemason. And so he told me, you're going to have to travel. If you truly want to learn more, you want to understand more, and eventually try at any point to try and teach anybody anything, you're going to have to broaden your horizons. You are going to have to go further yourself. You're going to have to go to different countries, go through the oral traditions, talk to people to understand what's really going on in this world, because you're only going to have a very pinpoint view or a shallow view of the world and the people in it based upon what people tell you. Or if you look at social media or regular media, mainstream media, what people show you. Most people would never know that all of these areas that are out there in Europe and in Asia all have people that are Negroid. Every area, all the islands of the sea, Peru, Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba. You have to go to these places to really see that there are people that are dark as me, as dark as me, and some darker. But they carry some of the features of the people in that region, whether it be Asian, Afro-Asian, and even European. So the mixtures are all there, but what we're shown is different. They're shown the people that are on the top of society based upon a caste system. What I'm basically saying is we have to get out of this hating people because of the color of their skin, or what we think, or what we've been told that our ancestors or their ancestors did to us. Because that's not true. It's not true. Yes, were there people that were of European descent that are in charge of the banking systems or the debt slavery systems of today? Yes. Are those same people, whether you want to say Rockefellers or Rothschilds, especially Rockefellers, that's in charge of the education system today? Yes. One of the biggest donors to black colleges is the Rockefellers. You think that's by design? So are we truly being educated at those places or indoctrinated by these folks who choose to shape society based upon how they feel, with their beliefs, what they want us to know? When you go to college, do you get to pick everything that you want to go through, everything that you want to read, or do you have to go through a whole bunch of electives that sometimes take you completely away from the path of what you really want to learn? That's food for thought. But in stand with what we know, racism is taught. It's learned. It's not innate. It's not something you're born with. Put two babies in daycare for 3 years, from the time that they can crawl on their bellies to the time that they can walk. See how they act towards each other. They're not going to look at the other one's skin because their colors, one is European and one is Hamitic or Shemitic, African or Negro American, and say, oh, I don't like you, or I hate you, I can't be around you. They're going to go off of their spirit, their personalities, their characters, the characteristics of how they act and how they treat. I hate to tell you from personal experience, a lot of the people that I've had that showed me hate or treated me bad were direct family members, meaning my blood, folks that look like me, friends, people in the military, look just like me, treated me like trash. Some of the people that helped me out the most were folks of European descent, or what you could look on their face or with their skin tone and say they white, not knowing how deep their history goes. I had to learn as a child, just because somebody says they hate you or people say those folks hate you, don't mean they do. You learn based upon each person and your experience with them. Please stop listening to people telling you who and what to hate based upon a color, based upon limited knowledge, understanding, and or experience. The spirit should bear witness. When you talk with someone, that's when you know when you can vibe with them or you can't. That's when you can feel their negative or their positive energy. Some people are good at hiding it. Some people are what you would call master manipulators or narcissistic. It's very difficult to read some people. And that's true. Again, that doesn't matter what color. That's everybody. I really would hate to keep seeing these folks who call themselves Israelites on these corners preaching hate and division. Period. Talking about Esau, the white man. Come on, man. Come on. Christ didn't teach that. That's not what he taught. Love thy God, Lord thy God with all thy heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's pretty simple. Blood sacrifice is done and away with. So what you should be teaching people is baptism and repentance. See, again, when you understand that for people to follow in those laws, statutes, commandments, and feast days, guess what? They become what you would call spiritual Israel by sojourning and grafting in. Who are you to say who God has chosen, who he hasn't? You are not God. You're no different than the Catholic faith in what they taught, what they used to conquer throughout the world. That's what was used to conquer the Negroes here through Columbus. Christianity. That's what's being used to conquer the Negroes and everybody else, Europeans as well now, into spiritual slavery, ignorance, false teachings of who Christ is, what he looks like, and what he represented. He didn't come to do away with the laws, feast days, statutes, and definitely not the commandments. The Sabbath day, he came to do away with blood sacrifice because people took that and they ran away with it. I'm going to send 6 days out the week and I'm just going to show up with a clean animal, let it be sacrificed, and all my sins are gone. Now I can go back to sinning for another 6 days out the week. We have to get away from the precepts of men. We have to go away from people that aren't teaching you anything spiritually and just trying to make you feel good with a good lesson, with them hemming and hawing and dancing all over the pulpit and saying, oh, now that I've given you this show, go ahead, pay me. Pass that collection plate 2, 3, 4 times. I didn't think I was going to touch on this in closing, but I am. When you read Malachi, don't just read that one verse. What is it? Malachi 3 and 6. Well, 3 and 4. Don't just read the one verse that talks about robbing God and on paying tithes. Understand that tithes, did it come from? Was it spoken into? Yeah. But it was spoken because out of the 12 tribes, the Levites weren't given anything. They were given a responsibility to upkeep of the temple, putting it up, taking it down, preaching, cleaning, all of that. They weren't given land. That wasn't amongst them. They weren't given a land. They weren't given all those special things. Land, money, crops, none of that stuff. They weren't given that. So at that time, that was for them. And whatever they had left over went along for the widowers, or the women whose men had died in battle or had died, and orphans, kids. Now, to take it a little further back, because some folks will say, well, no, Abraham gave to Melchizedek. When you read in Jasher, you'll find out that Melchizedek is actually Shem. And Abraham learned under Noah and Shem how to be a Melchizedek priest. That being said, he went to war. He gave 10% of the spoils of that war and or battle to Shem, who is Melchizedek. He chose to do that. We are not supposed to still be giving folks money for them to buy brand new cars and big houses and get fat off the hog over us. That's debt slavery, no different than what we're going through with these houses, with these cars. I mean, and houses in the land. We paying for space or houses on a land that was stolen from a people. Tell me how that makes sense. Do I hate the system? Oh, by all means, I do. Do I hate the people that perpetrated the system from its inception? No, that's not for me to do. It's not. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So whatever somebody's done to you in your past, done in the past, that's not for you to stay and hold on to and hold that grudge. It's actually for you to forgive them and move forward. Your forgiveness isn't just for them. It doesn't let them off. Forgiveness lets you off. Not having forgiveness is what shows hate for whoever. You can be wronged by your father as a woman, and you carry a grudge or an hatefulness down to your sons and to any other man that you have contact with from that point on. You can say that you love them, and your actions can still show that same grudge you carried from your father, which would be hate, and vice versa. I need you to stop and think about who you are allowing to lead you. And leading you into hatred is leading you into sin and leading you away from the Most High. That's the spiritual aspect. The carnal aspect, the flesh aspect, there's no way I could have grown up in Baltimore hating people that didn't look like me. I wouldn't have got anywhere. I wouldn't have learned anything. And it damn sure wouldn't have worked for me in the military for 20 years and some change. I learned very young that a race of people, aren't your enemy. What each person represents within their characteristics, in their spirit, how they treat you, that's what you know. So you don't hate them, you forgive them, and you keep forgiving them. 77 times a 7 is what Christ said. But forgiving someone does not mean that you continue to put yourself around them and in harm's way, or them harming your spirit and them harming your heart. You have to create boundaries for that. Like I said, the pretext of this, for me, based upon what was been on my spirit, is again this hate. But at the end of this, I need people to understand that whether you choose to just look at what's just on mainstream media or pay attention to all this stuff that's going on around the world, these natural disasters, which comes from the Most High himself, now is definitely the time to get right. Get rid of hate because of what you were taught or what you may have gone through in the past. I would definitely say repent to the Most High. Start following what His Word says and not what man is telling you it says. And get baptized for the remission of your sins and the sins of your forefathers. Once you do that, follow those laws, statutes, commandments. Not all 613 laws. Remember, He puts it in your heart. That's what the new covenant is. There's no New Testament and Old Testament. It's all the same. That wording was changed by men. Yes, that wording was changed by men. It's not supposed to mean testament. Look in the Strong's Concordance. It's covenant. The new covenant wasn't written on tablets of stone. They were written in your heart. How to treat people, how to act, how to worship the Most High. That's everybody. Stop thinking it's exclusive to just a particular bloodline. In honesty, in that bloodline, they were supposed to be the priestly nation. A nation of kings and priests. So what does that mean? They're the people that's supposed to act a certain way. Not higher than anybody else. But what do kings do? What do priests do? They serve. So you serve people. You teach them properly and correctly. You show them how to live. By your actions. Not by your words. Not by telling someone they're lesser than you. Because we're all the same. At the end of the day, we are all the same. The Most High is no respecter of persons. He don't care what your skin tone look like, what your bloodline is. If you wicked, you're going to hell. And if you're righteous, you're His. It's time for you to make that choice. It's time for you to stop hating people and showing hate in your actions. Because you do that. When you talk about people all the time and it's always negative, that's showing hate. That's showing resentment. That's backbiting. These are things that the Most High doesn't like. Again, read for yourself. We need to change as a people. Because the times are coming now. Because we are in the last days. Or what you would call the end times. The times are now that we're going to need each other. Not based upon your race. Not based upon the color of your skin. Based upon your love and your charity. Fruits of the Spirit. Your long suffering. Loving your neighbor as yourself. Helping those who need help. Who appreciate that help. You serve the Most High if you are a priestly or kingly nation. You don't serve yourself, your self-interest, or your pride. I hope this lesson blesses those who have ears to hear. And if you have eyes to see the truth bears witness in the Spirit. Shalom.